Okay, which choice best describes the overall structure? This is again going to be a function question. What does the entire text function to do? Is it presenting a theoretical concept? Is it introducing a respected researcher? Is it naming the company where an important mathematician worked? Is that the purpose? Or it's mentioning a paper and offering a summary of the findings? Let's take a look. I doubt it's naming a company. That doesn't seem right at all at the beginning. But let's look. Mathematician Claude Shannon is widely regarded as a foundational figure in information theory. His most important paper, A Mathematical Theory of Communication, published in 1948, when he was employed at Bell Labs, utilized a concept called a binary digit, shortened to bit, to measure the amount of information in any signal and determine the fastest rate at which information could be transmitted while still seemingly reliably decipherable. Okay, so the idea that he worked for Bell Labs is not really the key idea. The fact that he, created or postulated the binary digit, a bit, which is a unit of information, that is important. So the function of this seems to be tell us that he made this foundational discovery. Gallagher, one of Shannon's colleagues, said that the bit was Shannon's discovery, and from it the whole communications revolution has sprung. So not only is it important, it's so important the whole communication revolution sprung from it, according to somebody else. So let's see what answer matches. It presents a theoretical concept, the bit, illustrates how the name of that concept has changed. Well, it didn't really change. They just shortened a binary digit to bit, so that's not right. And it shows how the name has entered common usage. Well, no, it doesn't really show that. We might know that, but that's not what it shows. A is not the right answer. B, it introduces a respected researcher. Yeah, he's widely regarded, so I guess we could say that's a respected researcher. Okay. He describes an aspect of his work. Yep, he wrote a paper about the bit. Okay. And suggests why the work is historically significant. And yes, there is a comment from somebody else that suggests why the work. So this is good, but I want to be careful of one thing. Is this telling us what the text is saying as opposed to what the purpose of it is? I'm not sure this is answering the function B, but let's go on. Let's check C and D. C, it names the company where an important mathematician worked. Okay, we don't really care about the company. That's not the key idea. Okay. D, it mentions a paper. Okay, the mathematical theory of communication. It does do that. Offers a summary of the paper's findings. The findings indicate the binary digit or the bit is the most basic amount of information that can be processed. And it presents a researcher's commentary on the paper. There is another researcher who makes a commentary in the paper. This is true as well. All the parts are correct. Now, what's the difference between B and D? Mentions a paper, offers a summary, and presents a commentary. Is that the function? Or introduces a researcher, describes an aspect of his work, and suggests why the work is historically significant? Why the work is historically significant? That is more important. That's more of a function, right? It's not just saying what his work is, it's putting his work into context. What's the purpose of his work? Why is it important? That's different than just simply mentioning a paper, summarizing, and presenting commentary. I mean, this is literal what happens, okay? That is not the same thing as function. This is function. B is going to be our correct answer, not D. Okay, which choice best states the function of the underlined sentence in the overall structure? So we want to know, what is this underlined section doing? A study by a team, including finance professor such and such, suggests that exposure to sunshine during the workday can lead to overly optimistic behavior. Using data spanning from 1994 to 2010 for a set of U.S. custom companies, the team compared over 29,000 annual earnings forecast to the actual earnings later reported by those companies. Okay, this is kind of the how they did it. This is the method. Okay. The team found, this is the conclusion, they found the greater exposure to sunshine at the work 2 weeks before managers submitted an earnings forecast, the more managers' forecast exceeded what the company actually earned. So there is a result, right? They're too optimistic if they're exposed to sunshine, which shows the original claim has some validity. The underlying portion is just there to show the data, show the method. So to summarize the results, it's not about results. The underlined section is to present a specific example that illustrates the study's findings. No, this is not an example. This is a method. It's how they did it. To explain part of the methodology used in the team study. That's exactly it. C is going to be our correct answer. D, to call out a challenge the team faced in conducting its analysis. No, the underlying portion is not calling out a challenge. C is correct. Okay, another function question. What's the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? So the following text is adapted from such and such short story, John Redding Goes to Sea. John is a child who lives in a town in the woods. Okay, I'm going to know the function of this underlined portion. Not merely what it says, but what's the function of it in the text. Perhaps 10-year-old John was puzzling to the folk there in Florida woods, for he was an imaginative child and fond of daydreams. The St. John River flowed a scarce 300 feet from his back door. On its banks at this point grow numerous palms, luxurious magnolias, and bay trees. On the bosom of the stream float millions of delicately colored hyacinths. John loved to wander down to the water's edge and, casting in dry twigs, watch them sail away down the stream to Jacksonville, the sea, the wide world, and he wanted to follow them. Okay, so what is this showing? He lives in this environment, which sounds, quite comforting and pretty, but he doesn't seem to be happy. He's sort of casting his twigs, which seem to embody his dreams, and he watches them sail down to the stream, and he wants to follow them. He wants to go out into the world. He doesn't want to be there in Florida. So that seems to be the function of the underlying section. Let's see what answer matches. A, it provides an extended description of a location John likes to visit. No, that's just where John's from. He actually wants to get out of there, apparently. B, it reveals that some residents of John's towns are confused by his behavior. Yeah, but that's not the function of the underlined text, right? That's true in the passage, not the underlined function. C, it illustrates the uniqueness of John's imagination compared to the There's no comparison to other children's imagination. Again, a false comparative. D, it suggests that John longs to experience a larger life outside the Florida woods. Yes, he wants to follow the twigs to the sea. He wants to experience the rest of the world, a larger life. That could demonstrate. D is going to be the correct answer. Okay, we want the main purpose of the text. This is again, what's the function of the entire paragraph? So let's see. A number of indigenous politicians have been elected to the U.S. Congress since 2000 as members of the country's two established political parties, Democrats and Republicans. Okay? In Canada and several Latin American countries, on the other hand, so this is being contrasted. This idea, Canada and Latin America will be contrasted to the U.S. Indigenous people have formed their own political parties to advance candidates who will advocate for their interests of their communities. So in the U.S., the indigenous candidates join the existing parties. In Canada and Latin America, they form their own parties. This movement has been particularly successful in Ecuador, where such and such a member of the indigenous party, known as Pachakutik, was elected president of the National Assembly. Okay, so we have an example of somebody who successfully became the National Assembly president in another country. So what's the purpose of this text? To point out and contrast the differences between the U.S. and the Canadian Latin American approaches to indigenous politics. So A, to trace the history of an indigenous political movement? No. We're not actually following an indigenous political movement. That's not right. We're following indigenous politicians in different countries, but A is not correct. To argue that indigenous politicians in the U.S. should form their own political party. Okay, this is the idea when something seems appealing that we answer should form their own. Well, that's just not in the text, right? Nothing in the text makes that recommendation. So don't make that assumption. B is not correct. C, to highlight two approaches to achieving political representation for Indigenous people. That's correct. There are two approaches. They're contrasted, so they're highlighted against each other, and they're examples of political presentation for Indigenous people. C is going to be accurate. That's correct. That's simply what it's doing. It's highlighting the two approaches. That's the function. Let's check D. To consider how Indigenous politicians in the U.S. have influenced Indigenous politicians. No, nothing says the U.S. Indigenous politicians influenced Canadian or Latin ones. That's not correct. C is the correct answer.